Hello dear students. As you know, in previous class or in previous lecture we were discussing about the topic control and coordination, and till now we had already discussed that basically there is a process inside the living organism to give an appropriate response to the various environmental changes known as stimuli, and that process is known as control and coordination. In human beings, this control and coordination or this response is achieved with the help of two systems, nervous system and endocrine system. In previous class we had discussed about the component of the nervous system, the structure of the neuron, the classification of the neuron, then the functioning mechanism of the nerve cells, in which we had discussed about the process of excitation, the various stages of it, polarization, depolarization, repolarization and hyperpolarization, and after that conduction of nerve impulses, in which we had discussed about the electrical and chemical synapses. Now furthermore, in today's class we will discuss about the structure of the human nervous system, in which we will discuss about the structure of brain, structure of spinal cord, the cranial nerves, spinal nerves, and few important points about the autonomic nervous system. So we will start with the structure of human nervous system. Now in my entire body, the network of the nerves and the different part of the nervous system is present. We broadly used to divided it into two parts. The part which used to run along with the median axis of my body, that is known as central nervous system. So central nervous system, it is a soft hollow part which runs mid dorsal part, mid and dorsal towards the backward side. Inside this part, brain and spinal cord is present, and the part which is not in direct contact with the median axis, that means the nerves present inside our limbs, then in our body area, they used to form the peripheral nervous system. In peripheral nervous system, two sub parts are present. The part which is under the control of our wish, named as voluntary, and the another one which used to run or governed by itself only, which is named as autonomic nervous system. So we will start to discuss with the central nervous system of our body. So first important part is, it is a soft hollow part which runs mid dorsal, that means it is in direct contact with the median axis and run towards the backward side. Two important part of it are brain and spinal cord. Now this central nervous system is present inside the axial skeleton of our body. It is present inside the central nervous system is present inside axial skeleton of our body. Central nervous system is present inside the axial skeleton of our body, and inside this axial skeleton, this central nervous system is filled with a specific liquid named as cerebrospinal fluid. Now the pH of this cerebrospinal fluid is slightly alkaline, 7.33. Composition of it is similar to lymph. Composition is similar to lymph. It contains the protein, mainly albumin and globulin, then glucose, cholesterol, urea, bicarbonate, sulfates and chlorides of the sodium and potassium. We need to remember that the concentration of protein and cholesterol inside it is lesser in compared to blood plasma, whereas the concentration of chloride is higher. Now, from where does it used to come? We used to say this cerebrospinal fluid is secreted by anterior and choroid flexes. Now, the entire brain and spinal cord, if I will consider it that this is an ideal example of my brain, then this brain is covered by a three membranous structure. So brain is covered by three membranous structure named as meninges. The outermost is durameter, middle one is arachnoid, and the innermost is pyometer. Several times questions used to come, what is the correct sequence of the meninges from inner to outer side or from outer to inner side? If they used to ask from outer to inner side, then this is durameter, arachnoid and pyometer. If they used to ask from inner to outer side, then it is pyometer, arachnoid and durameter. Now, the innermost membrane is pyometer. This pyometer enters at two places, in front and in back, inside the brain to form the choroid flexes. So, at two places, pyometer fused into the brain to form choroid flexes, and this choroid flexes only used to secrete or used to be the source of the cerebrospinal fluid. What is the utilization or what is the importance of this cerebrospinal fluid? This cerebrospinal fluid used to act as a shock absorber. It used to act as a shock absorber. It also used to provide the nourishment to the brain cells or tissues, because blood never used to enter inside the brain, and it also helped to remove the metabolic waste. So we are discussing about the structure of human nervous system. We used to divide the human nervous system into two important parts. The part which is in direct contact with the central or median axis of our body, named as central nervous system. This nervous system is present inside the axial skeleton of our body. It is a soft part, hollow from the inner side, and present towards the dorsal part of the nervous system. The important component of it are brain and spinal cord. Inside both brain and spinal cord, a specific type of liquid is present. So filled is surrounded and named as cerebrospinal fluid. The pH of this fluid is slightly alkaline, 7.33, and composition is quite similar to lymph. It contains protein like albumin and globulin, glucose, cholesterol, urea, bicarbonate, sulfate and chlorides of sodium and potassium. Need to remember the protein and cholesterol concentration is lesser in compared to plasma, whereas chloride concentration is higher in compared to plasma. The source of cerebrospinal fluid, we used to say it is secreted by the anterior and posterior choroid flexes. What are choroid flexes? We used to say brain used to get covered by three membranous structures, togetherly named as meninges. The name of these three membrane: outermost durameter, middle one arachnoid, and the innermost pyometer. The pyometer membrane used to enter at two places inside the brain to form anterior and choroid flexes, which are the source, or it used to secrete the cerebrospinal fluid. This fluid used to act as a shock absorber. It used to provide the nourishment, and it used to remove the metabolic waste. We also need to remember the study of brain is named as encephalology. Now, in between these three membranes, we used to say between durameter and arachnoid subdural space is present, and between arachnoid and pyometer subarachnoid space is present. Now, when we start to discuss about the internal structure of brain, we used to say that brain is mainly divided into three parts. We can say like that: a part present in front of this line, the part which is represented by the line itself, and part present behind the line. So I can consider these three parts similar to my brain. The part in front of line, forebrain, the line itself, midbrain, and the part present behind the line, which is named as midbrain. So my brain is mainly divided into three parts: forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain. Now, the forebrain is further divided into three regions: olfactory lobes, cerebrum and diencephalon. Olfactory lobe, cerebrum and diencephalon. Now, olfactory lobes are not well developed inside the human, but it is well developed in animals like dogs and cats, which used to have keen sensation of smell. Now, inside it, olfactory tract is present, which relay the sensation of smell towards the temporal lobe. We will discuss it bit later. The largest part of our brain is cerebrum itself only. So in forebrain, in this part, I need to show you two subparts, cerebrum and diencephalon. If I will open it, inside it, it is a hollow cavity. Cavity is a hollow space covered by all the sides. So the cavity of forebrain is diencephalon. So diencephalon is cavity of forebrain. Cavity of forebrain. Now, the major part is cerebrum. It is the largest part, and it used to get divided by a fissure. Fissure, in simple words, we used to say that line. So it used to get divided by this line into right and left cerebral hemisphere. So the cerebrum is used to get divided by syllabian fissure into right and left cerebral hemisphere, and they used to get connected by a band of connective tissue named as corpus callosum. Now, as we are representing this part as a brain itself, so you just consider it, this diagram similar with my brain. This is the forebrain part. Inside the forebrain, if I will see the name of the bones of this cranial region, then this is frontal bone, parietal bone, temporal bone and occipital bone. So inside each right and left cerebral hemisphere, four lobes are present: frontal lobe in front, parietal lobe on the upper side, temporal lobe on the lateral side and occipital lobe on the backward side. So the four lobes of the cerebral hemisphere are frontal lobe, parietal lobe, temporal lobe and occipital lobe. These are the four lobes, and in each lobe several areas are present which used to perform the specific function. For example, if I will see this part as a frontal lobe, I can judge the 4 points: 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 regions are present. These are motor area, premotor area, associate area and Broca area. The motor area used to control the voluntary actions, voluntary movement, premotor, involuntary movement, voluntary and involuntary movement. Then it is center for learning, reasoning and memory. So it is a center for learning, reasoning and memory. This associate area used to perform the side for learning, reasoning and memory. Over here, voluntary and involuntary functions, voluntary and involuntary movements are controlled. So we used to say, from the frontal lobe, we used to control the voluntary and involuntary movement. It is also the center of learning, reasoning and memory. The parietal lobe used to gives us the sensation of touch, temperature, pain, pressure and taste. It used to gives us the sensation of touch, temperature, pain, pressure and taste. From the temporal lobe, we used to get the sensation of smell. It helps us in hearing and understanding of speech. Understanding of speech. So, over here we used to say smell, hearing and understanding of speech. Whereas from occipital lobe, we used to see the objects. It helps us in the vision. So we are discussing about the internal structure of brain. We used to divide into three parts: forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain. The forebrain is further divided into three regions: the olfactory lobes, cerebrum and diencephalon. The cavity of brain is forebrain is diencephalon. The largest part is cerebrum. It is divided by syllabian fissure into right cerebral hemisphere and left cerebral hemisphere. Right used to control the functions of left side of our body and left used to control the function of right side of our body. No matter whether it is a right cerebral hemisphere or left cerebral hemisphere, each cerebral hemisphere used to contain the four lobes: frontal lobe, parietal lobe, temporal lobe and occipital lobe. Inside the frontal lobe, four regions are present: motor area, premotor, associate and Broca, which helps us in controlling the voluntary and involuntary movement. It is also the center for learning, reasoning and memory. The associate area is the center for learning, reasoning and memory, and Broca area helps in the formation of the speech. Inside the parietal lobe, three regions are present. These are somatostatic, gustatory and lateral side. Somatostatic gives us the sensation of touch, temperature, pain and pressure. Gustatory used to gives us the sensation of taste, and lateral side helps in the assist in the speech formation. Temporal lobe present on the lateral side. Three ideal regions are important regions are olfactory area, auditory area and vernacle area. Olfactory helps in gives us the sensation of smell. Auditory gives us in the sensation of hearing, and vernacle in the understanding of speech. Whereas the inside the occipital lobe, no specific area is present. It helps us in the vision. So forebrain, three regions: olfactory lobe, not well developed in human, developed in the organisms like dogs and cats, which used to have keen sensation of smell. Olfactory tracts are present inside it, which used to relay the sense of smell towards temporal lobe, and inside the temporal lobe with olfactory area we used to get the sensation of smell. The largest part of our entire brain is cerebrum only, divided by syllabian fissure into right and left cerebral hemisphere. These hemispheres used to get connected by a band of connective tissue named as corpus callosum. Inside each cerebral hemisphere, right cerebral controls the function of left side of our body and left controls the functions of right side. Inside each cerebral hemisphere, four lobes are present. They are frontal, parietal, temporal and occipital. The frontal controls the voluntary and involuntary movement, center for learning, reasoning and memory, and formation of speech. Parietal gives us the sensation of touch, temperature, pain, pressure and taste. Temporal helps us in smell, hearing, understanding of speech. Vision is controlled by occipital lobe. Now, we had already discussed about the olfactory lobe and cerebrum. The cavity is named as diencephalon. Cavity generally it represents the hollow covered space. Hollow, that means it will used to have one roof, one floor and side wall. So the cavity of forebrain is diencephalon. It is the cavity of forebrain. Inside it, three regions are present: epithalamus, thalamus and hypothalamus. We may consider it as roof, side wall and floor. So the entire cavity is named as diencephalon. The roof of cavity is epithalamus. The side wall is thalamus and the floor is hypothalamus. Inside the roof, pineal body is present, which is an endocrine gland. We will discuss in the chapter chemical control and coordination about it. From the thalamus part, various nerve tracts used to carry the information from the forebrain towards the hindbrain. Now, hypothalamus, it is the structure which connects the nervous system with an endocrine system. So we used to say that the entire control and coordination is achieved with the help of nervous system and endocrine system, and both systems are connected each other with the help of hypothalamus. Now, maximum time question used to comes related with the function of the brain, and they generally used to ask sometimes the function related with the cerebral hemisphere. Most of the time they used to ask with the function related with hypothalamus, medulla and pons varolai. So hypothalamus, it is the center for regulating the hunger and thirst mechanism, sleep and wake cycle, fatigue, emotions, anger, satisfaction, pleasure, sexual behavior, and along with it, it is also the center for controlling carbohydrate, fat metabolism, body temperature, which is known as thermoregulatory center. Thermoregulatory center. For example, during the time of fever, our body temperature used to get increased. So the thermoregulatory center of the hypothalamus start to control this temperature, and it also controls the blood pressure and water balance, water and iron balance. So it is the most important part of our brain, the hypothalamus, which connects the nervous system with the endocrine system through hypothalamus hypophyseal portal axis. It used to connect through hypothalamus hypophyseal portal axis. It contains the centers which regulates the hunger and thirst mechanism, sleep and wake cycle, fatigue, emotions, anger, satisfaction, and also control the carbohydrate and fat metabolism, regulate the body temperature with the help of thermoregulatory center, and also control the blood pressure and water balance. Likewise, the forebrain, inside the hindbrain also three regions are present. They are cerebellum, medulla oblongata and pons varolai. Whereas inside the midbrain, four lobes are present which are togetherly. Togetherly, that means corpora, four means quadri, and lobes gemina. So four lobes are present inside each, named as corpora together, quadri, four, gemina, lobes. Corpora, quadri, gemina, two superior lobes and two inferior. Superior involved in the sight reflexes and inferior involved in the auditory reflexes. Cerebellum, it used to regulate the posture and equilibrium of our body when we used to sit down, lay down, or whenever we are in a standing position. Which muscle need to remain in contract stage and which muscle need to remain in relax, it is decided by the cerebellum. We need to remember all the activities of it are involuntary in nature. Involuntary in nature. Medulla oblongata, it is a pyramidal shaped structure. Pyramidal shaped structure. Remain in contact with central canal of spinal cord. Contact with central canal of spinal cord. Inside the medulla oblongata, several centers are present. The cardiac center of it used to regulate the heart rate. Respiratory center used to regulate the breathing mechanism. inspiration and expiration. Vasomotor center regulates the blood pressure, diameter of the blood vessels, and reflex center used to regulate the activities like sneezing, coughing, vomiting, etc. Reflex action for sneezing, coughing, vomiting, etc. So medulla को याद रखना जरूरी है. Need to remember it. Cardiac center to regulate the heart rate, respiratory center to regulate the breathing mechanism, inspiration and expiration, vasomotor to regulate the diameter of blood vessels, and reflex center for sneezing, coughing and vomiting. Pons. Inside it, pneumotaxic and apneustic center is present. Breathing rate, respiration rate is maintained by the medulla oblongata, but the pattern and depth of breathing, pattern, that means I can change the pattern of breathing, forceful expiration, deep inspiration. So this pattern and depth is regulated by pneumotaxic and apneustic center, whereas normal breathing, inspiration and expiration is regulated by the respiration center of medulla. So pons control the depth and pattern of breathing. It also controls the movement of eyeballs and facial expression along with micturition process. Micturition is the process of voiding out of the urine. So this is the entire structure of brain, in which we had discussed about the forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain. Inside the forebrain, major part is cerebrum. Cerebral hemisphere are present, 4 lobes, frontal, parietal, occipital and temporal. And in each lobe the functions we need to remember. Then about the hindbrain and about the cerebellum, medulla and pons feruli. Now the next part is histology of the central nervous system. We used to say some part of it contains the white matter on the inner side and some part contain the grey matter of inner side. Now we need to remember the histology of the central nervous system with this diagram, in which it is shown that grey matter is present on the outer side. The grey matter is on outer side and white matter is on inner side. Such structures, such part are present inside the cerebrum, diencephalon and cerebellum. So cerebrum, diencephalon and cerebellum, inside it white matter is present, outside it grey matter is present. Whereas when the grey matter is present on inside and white matter is on outer side, these structures are spinal cord and brain stem. Brain stem, the part of it are midbrain, medulla and pons feruli. So we need to remember this histology of brain also. Now the next structure is spinal cord. We used to say that on the mid-dorsal part inside the vertebral column, a cord-like structure is present named as spinal cord. So it forms the posterior backward side part of central nervous system, running mid and dorsal on the backward side in the neural canal of the vertebral column. It starts from the first cervical vertebra, atlas, and end near to first and second lumbar vertebra in the form of conus medullaris. Near to conus medullaris, filament-like structure phylum terminalis is present, and several parallel spinal nerves are present, which are named as cauda equina. Now, likewise, brain spinal cord is also covered by 3 meninges. As it is cleared, the inner side of spinal cord is made up from grey matter and the outer is white matter. So inside it grey matter is present and outside it white matter is present. How to identify the anterior and posterior part? The anterior part, the frontal part, contain the wider canal, and the posterior contain the narrow canal. the white matter used to get divided into 6 parts, 3 on each side, 3 on right and 3 on left. These are anterior funiculus, lateral funiculus and posterior funiculus. Anterior funiculus, lateral and posterior funiculus. So in the inner side, gray matter is present, in which associated and motor neuron is present, and white matter used to form the 6 funiculi in which medulated nerve fibers are present. This spinal cord help us in the reflex action and reflex arc. So what are reflex action and reflex arc? There are sudden, spontaneous, means very immediate involuntary actions or involuntary response for specific stimuli. So sudden spontaneous response for stimuli is named as reflex action, and the path followed during this reflex action is named as reflex arc. These reflex actions are broadly divided into 2 parts: simple or unconditional reflex action, which are present inside our body from birth. For example, knee jerk reflex action, corneal reflex. If object is coming towards our eyes, we used to close our eyes. If we will taper our patella, then we will bend the knee. That is named as knee jerk reflex action. And there are conditional reflex action which are not present inside us from birth, but later on by learning or training we used to develop it. It was firstly demonstrated by I.P. Pavlov, in which he always used to ring the bell in front of a dog before giving him food. So after some time he demonstrated that immediately when he start to ring the bell, there will be a salivation inside the buccal cavity of the dog. So that are the example of reflex action. Now the best example, whenever we used to pinch a pin on our finger, we immediately used to remove our hand. That is a common example of simple or unconditional reflex action. As soon as pin used to pinch the finger, the mechanoreceptor, which are sensitive for touch and pressure, used to get activated and generate the nerve impulse. Used to get excited and generate the nerve impulse. This impulse travels along with the sensory root or dorsal root and enters inside the spinal cord. Inside the spinal cord, interneuron used to analyze the information and generate the response. This response is carried out by the motor neurons through ventral root and reaches to the effector organ. In this case, it is a biceps muscles which used to get contract, and we used to remove the finger from the pin. Now, the importance of this reflex action is they are very quick. They reduces the harm from the stimuli to our body. They are very accurate and they reduce the overtaxing of the brain. Now, there are certain reflex action which are present at the time of birth, but gradually they used to turn up into the voluntary activity from the involuntary action and named as inhibition of reflex action. For example, for a newborn baby, micturition, the voiding out of urine, and defecation, the removal of the feces from body, is reflex action, but gradually when the nervous system used to get developed, this activity turns up into voluntary activity, and this is named as inhibition of the reflex action. Now the next part is peripheral nervous system, in which we used to discuss about the cranial nerve, spinal nerves and autonomous nervous system. For cranial nerves, we need to remember there are 12 pairs. 12 pairs of cranial nerves are present, out of which 10 comes from brain stem only. 10 comes from brain stem only. Now the most difficult part is how to remember the name and nature of these cranial nerves, because several time questions used to come on the name or nature, or really they used to ask about the function. To remember the name and nature, we need to remember A line on old Olympic tower top, a Finn and German view some hope. So O for olfactory, O for optic, oculomotor, trochlear, trigeminal, abducens, facial, auditory, glossopharyngeal, vagus, spinal accessory and hypoglossal. These are the name of the cranial nerve. Now, to remember the nature, a cranial nerve may be sensory in nature, may be motor in nature, or may be mixed, means can act as sensory as well as motor. So, to remember the nature, we used to remember this line. Some says money matter, but my brother says big book matter more. Some say sensory, money, matter, motor, but both motor, both sensory, both motor and motor. So that is how we can remember the name and nature of the cranial nerve. The first cranial nerve, olfactory, helps us to generate the sensation of smell. Optic gives us the sensation of sight or vision. Third, fourth and sixth. Third, fourth and sixth, they are related with movement of eyeball. Okay, you need to remember this pair, third, fourth and sixth. Now, the first, second and eighth, they are sensory in nature. First, second and eighth, these are sensory. Third, fourth, sixth and ninth, they are motor, and remaining are mixed nerve. Now, trigeminal, it used to gives us the sensation, tongue movement, mastication. Facial expression, movement of neck. Glossopharyngeal gives us the sensation of taste, touch, movement. Now the longest cranial nerve is vagus, and the shortest or smallest cranial nerve is trochlear. Now, vagus helps us in sound production, speech formation, peristaltic movement, and the most important function, inhibition of heart rate. Heart rate is decreased with the help of vagus nerve. So that is how you need to remember the functions of the cranial nerve. Now, the spinal nerves, we used to say 31 pairs are present, divided into 5 groups: cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral and coccygeal. C8, T12, L5, S5, C1. Now, then autonomic nervous system, sympathetic and parasympathetic, both are sympathetic and parasympathetic antagonist to each other, means they work opposite to each other. The parasympathetic, we used to say it is a craniosacral outflow, and sympathetic, this is thoracic lumbar outflow. Now, several time questions used to come that what will be the effect of the sympathetic nervous system on this structure or the parasympathetic. To remember them, you need to remember that sympathetic used to remain activated, the sympathetic remain activated during emergency conditions, whereas parasympathetic remain activated during normal conditions or relaxed conditions. The effect on the iris. The sympathetic used to expand the pupil so that more amount of light rays will enter in our eye, whereas parasympathetic used to contract the pupil. Salivary glands, gastric gland, intestinal glands, tears, pancreas. The sympathetic used to decrease the secretion of these structures, whereas parasympathetic used to increase the secretion. Liver. The sympathetic decreases the secretion of bile and increases the release of sugar, because in emergency condition more energy is required, whereas parasympathetic, it increases the bile production and promote the formation of glycogen. It to store the glucose in liver. Parasympathetic helps in the storage of glucose, whereas sympathetic helps in the releasing of the sugar. The heart rate is increased by sympathetic nervous system, whereas decreased by the parasympathetic nervous system. Peripheral artery is used to get contracted and blood pressure increases in the effect of sympathetic, whereas in the effect of parasympathetic, peripheral arteries dilates and the blood pressure used to get decreased. The secretion of sweat increases with the help of sympathetic, decreases with the help of parasympathetic. The hairs used to get erect with the help of sympathetic and they remain oblique in the effect of parasympathetic. Bronchi dilates under the effect of sympathetic, whereas it used to get constrict during the effect of parasympathetic. Urinary bladder get relaxed under the effect of sympathetic. It used to get constrict under the effect of parasympathetic. It's all about the control and coordination. Thank you.